You will all agree. But I think as important as it has been to discuss the issues, it's as important that this early in the program, we immediately begin to define an agenda as well as an action plan. We can't leave today without an idea of a framework and a potential roadmap for each of our organizations, for ourselves as individuals, as well as the different policy makers and policy drivers that will make sure that what we discuss here does in fact turn into action. So, the next moderator who will be picking up on the issues surrounding the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development within the context of gender equality in the aviation sector this afternoon is Ms. Naadiya Moosajee. Naadiya is a social entrepreneur. She also is an engineer by profession, and she heads up a number of advocacy groups within the engineering sector and field in South Africa. I know Naadiya currently is dealing with a very interesting and a very sensitive matter in the South African engineering fraternity at the moment, an issue that certainly as women who are involved in that very technical field and want to see transformation, inclusivity, as well as sustainability and the welcoming of younger women through the ranks in that particular field. I can't wait to see what the outcome will be. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Naadiya a very warm round of applause, and she will then go on to introduce her guests.
Thank you so much, and I really do apologize. This is the graveyard shift. Who do I speak to about placing me before drinks, right? And I'm sure there's some jet lag in the room as well, so I really do apologize. And I'll make sure that the sun keeps shining in Cape Town. I'll give a call to the powers that be. But this is a really important session, and one that is a real big passion area for us as we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. And when we talk about the SDGs, everybody talks about SDG 5, which is around gender equality. And I will make the argument that unless we have gender equality across the board, intrinsic in each one of those goals is the need to actually be inclusive and have gender represented to be able to achieve those goals. And then when I think about just engineering, aviation, and transportation, and I think about how this industry is such an enabler for the SDGs. And so not just are we going to be talking about gender equality in aviation, but we're also going to be talking about how it is woven into the other goals. So, and just off the top of my head, I think about just the goal on innovation and infrastructure. We really, it's completely part of the aviation industry. So I am really fortunate today to have a fantastic panel that you will be hearing from shortly. And I must say it's probably the most inclusive panel that I have the pleasure of facilitating because we have everybody represented. We've got the World Bank, we've got UN agencies, we've got national government, we've got the private sector, and then we've got me, who's this kind of really oddball gender activist who's dealing with some serious challenges in South Africa at the moment. But today we're going to actually talk about what is it that is moving the needle forward within the aviation industry. And so first up, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Edward Bucas from the World Bank. And we actually, from my alma mater, he was doing his PhD while I was doing my master's in transportation engineering. And so, Edward, the floor is yours to share with us some of the work that the World Bank is doing.
Thanks, Naadiya. Thank you. Good day, everyone. Being from the World Bank, I often find that I'm either the most popular person in the room or the least popular person in the room. I'm not sure where I sit in this audience. So what I usually find is that there's generally agreement on what the World Bank's stated objectives are, what our goals are. Many of you will know that the World Bank has put out front that it has two primary goals. Those are to eradicate extreme poverty and then to boost shared prosperity. So it's through this lens that we approach the issue of gender equality in transportation. And we take a very hard stance on this. From our perspective, transport should not be gender neutral. Because you have to accept that men and women have different patterns of mobility and interface with transport systems in different ways. Women tend to access transportation systems through the lens of the economy of care. They tend to travel shorter distances. Their trips tend to be more multimodal. And in many instances, women travel off-peak and at a slightly slower pace. This is particularly pertinent for public transport systems, especially in the developing world. But in the developed world, in France, 2/3 of people in the public transport system are women. 67% in Zaragoza in Spain are women. And you find similar trends in Africa as well. Women also suffer a bigger transport burden than men, which then prevents them from joining the labor market. Women tend to be very responsible for domestic travel. They tend to have to travel at times when the transport system is not very accommodating to their needs. And then you have instances where transportation and the travel requirements can actually impact women's health. A major issue in transportation is that we've found that up to 80% of women are afraid of using public transport because they're afraid of being harassed. And this impacts directly upon their willingness to join the labor force or their ability to join the labor force. And while we're working towards this, currently designs in transportation systems still does not really put the issue of violence prevention in this main public space at the forefront. And yet there's a very strong business case for addressing these issues. 80% of women, as I said, are afraid of being harassed in public transport, and this directly leads to a reduction in women's labor force participation rates. And we've estimated that just increasing the participation rate by 25% can release $5.8 trillion into the economy. So there's a very strong case for this, and yet we find nearly 180 economies still do not explicitly prohibit sexual harassment in public spaces. The World Bank approaches this through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have an initiative that our president launched a few years back called Sustainable Mobility for All, which then targets specific SDGs as it relates to transport, which is target 11.2 to provide access, safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems with special attention to, and those are important words, those in situational vulnerability. And SDG 5, we know, aims to achieve gender equality and to empower women or girls. The World Bank has, through the Sum for All program, established a gender working group that tries to address these issues through the lenses of users, providers, and decision makers. Yesterday I was at a conference on SDGs, and one of the speakers showed this chart, which I thought was quite interesting, because what it says is that in the literature landscape on Africa, the academic literature, you'll find that the issues around SDG 5 feature quite prominently. In fact, they're top of the list. So the amount of papers that address those issues number the most. But then you contrast that with the actual investment categorized by SDGs, you'll find SDG 5 is all the way down at the bottom. So whilst the literature clearly emphasizes the importance of gender issues, especially as it relates to transport in Africa, we don't find that investment is necessarily following suit. And there's probably a number of reasons for this, but I think it's illustrative of there's a disparity of some kind. We're working hard to incorporate gender into transport. Female participation in the transport sector is still very low. And in fact, in many countries, there are legal barriers to women actually working in transport. As users and customers, women are more dependent on public transport, and yet the systems that they have to access don't really cater to their specific needs. I just thought I'd show this list. I'm not going to go through the details, but essentially what it shows is, and this is not an exhaustive list, laws on the statutes at the moment, specifically restricting women from acting in the transport space. Women cannot be train operators. Women cannot be test drivers. Women cannot work at night. And you find this in a whole range of countries, all different kinds of countries. So it's not a particular sector of the world, it's across the board. And these laws are old, some of them 2015, some of them 2000. So there are legislative barriers to women actually participating in the transport sector. In the aviation sector, we find that women as users cite that security is a major concern. In fact, in the US, sexual assault on in-flight cases has doubled since 2014, but the FBI estimates that there's probably still, the bulk of that is probably still unreported. And then affordability, of course, is a major issue for women as well. And then as providers, only 3% of the world's commercial pilots are women. And there's still a major pay gap, up to 10% in the sector, and women only make up 3% of chief executives in the industry. So there's a huge amount of travel that we still have to do before we can start making inroads on the issues at play here. And the bank is doing quite a bit to further these objectives. What I have here is just some of the data initiatives that the World Bank is doing, and there are many, and they're, I think, very well presented, and I encourage you to go and access these sites. The data I showed on legislation comes from the Women Business and the Law project, where they're examining laws differentiating men and women in up to 173 countries. There's the Global Findex Index, which looks at bi-yearly data on account savings and borrowings in 140, 150 countries. There's enterprise surveys, which gather firm-level data. And then we've also worked very hard towards improving access to gender data. I provided a number of resources here. We have a very well put together gender data portal, which I encourage you to go and visit. And then there's our 360 data portal, which also has additional sources of information on gender issues and hard data that you can access. So yeah, that's I think my contribution. Thank you very much.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and I think one of the key takeaways for me was that we should move away from, transport. It can't be gender neutral. It needs to be gender inclusive. So fantastic. That's, I think, just one of the snippets that I really am going to, jot down. So I've got the privilege of introducing the next guest is Henry Gourdji, who is the head of strategic planning, coordination, and partnerships at ICAO. And since joining, he's actually been leading and principally managing one of the leading programs, which is the Universal Safety Oversight Audit Program. So thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you onto stage, and you've traveled from very far as well.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, good afternoon. I'm pleased to represent ICAO on this session, which was referred to as, I think, the graveyard shift, and I'm hoping that you will be quite excited with this presentation and what everyone's presentation in this panel. This is a great opportunity for ICAO to showcase how aviation contributes to the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. the linkages between ICAO's 5 strategic objectives, its core work, to the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, we'll look at SDG 5 related to gender. Finally, specifically the pathway through which ICAO reflects its gender equality program into the organization's core work, its strategic objectives. So most of you are familiar with ICAO, but for those that may not, I'll just do one slide to give you a bigger picture of it. ICAO is the only organization in the United Nations Common System with aviation as a mandate, and has been responsible for close to 75 years of the adoption of international requirements and the development of global plans to enable the safe, secure, and orderly development of international civil aviation. Our work is accomplished through the strong and close collaboration with our 192 member states, the aviation industry, and our aviation safety partners. There are currently over 12,000 provisions in all of ICAO's documents, and it's through these provisions, as well as ICAO's monitoring program, the technical assistance and capacity building efforts, that the global aviation system is able to operate over 100,000 daily commercial flights safely, securely, and efficiently. So now that I touched a little bit about ICAO, let's look at the SDGs, and you already heard it from one of my panel members and a few others this morning, but during the Sustainable Development Summit held in September 2015, the UN member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which includes the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, each goal has a series of targets, so there's a total of 169 targets and many more indicators. Now, this landmark and universal commitment, undertaken at the highest levels, depends from the holistic cooperation of all sectors, including aviation, to promote the sustainable drive in global development. Now, with the development of the 2030 Agenda, sustainable air transport was then reinforced as an enabler for sustainable development. So of special note and interest to everyone in this room is SDG 5 on gender equality, achieving equality and empowering all women and girls. Now, each goal, as I said, has targets. Targets of interest with SDG 5 for the next few days is ending all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere, and ensuring women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making. Now let's put ICAO and these SDGs together. ICAO's mission to support and enable the healthy global air transport network that will ultimately contribute to the attainment of this 2030 Agenda is underpinned by our core work, which is in those 5 objectives, as I mentioned. These address the clear need to anticipate and manage the projected doubling of global air transport by 2030. So ICAO's 5 objectives are mapped to the Sustainable Development Goals and available on ICAO's public website. So if you go on the website and you click on the link, you'll get that interactive SDG map. And as you actually go through each box, you can click on it, and we'll show you the work that ICAO is doing from each of its objectives and how it relates to these Sustainable Development Goals. Now, you will note from the slide that SDG 5 cuts across all strategic objectives. Achieving gender equality across a sector is absolutely necessary to successfully achieve our strategic objectives and to support the achievement of the SDGs. This is even more important considering the growth of aviation today and the expectation to double its traffic in growth by 2030. Now, ICAO has been fully committed to enhancing gender equality and the advancement of women's development by supporting SDG 5, including the aim to achieve an aspirational goal of 50-50 women-men by 2030 at all professional and higher levels of employment in the global aviation sector, not just ICAO. Now, this commitment was reaffirmed through ICAO's 39th Assembly, the Resolution A3930, which urged states, regional and international aviation organizations, and the industry to take the necessary measures to strengthen gender equality. The resolution also called for the approval of an ICAO Gender Equality Programme, and our Secretary General mentioned this in her opening remarks this morning, which is aiming to support the achievement of equality between men and women at all grade levels in ICAO and in the aviation sector as a whole. So I'll just to run down what you find in this equality program. We have some of the objectives: building capacity and enhancing awareness for gender equality. We do this by assisting all ICAO staff members at all grade levels to understand how diversity and gender equality strengthens the organization. Enhancing gender representation. We strive to increase the number of qualified women in the professional and higher categories to 50% at all levels, in particular the technical and senior management positions. We increase accountability by having all the ICAO staff in managerial positions take responsibility for ensuring the equal participation of women and men in all areas of work. And finally, further engagement with our external partners by promoting gender equality in the global aviation community, such as this fora. The program is designed so that ICAO can take regular reporting on progress to the goal of gender equality by 2030. Regular reporting to our council of ICAO that represents the member states, but as well during our General Assembly every 3 years, we report back. To facilitate and coordinate the execution of this gender equality program, a detailed implementation plan has been issued which would guide ICAO in taking further actions on promoting gender equality in the aviation sector. Now, acting on the resolution and moving forward on the implementation of the plan, ICAO has expanded its data collection from its member states related to gender statistics. So we're already moving in accordance to the plan. However, we need to do more collectively. To successfully report on the Gender Equality Program, as well as the progress we make on SDG 5, requires the establishment of gender indicators and the collection of statistics and data from states and industry. Now, this has been a fundamental weak point for SDG 5, not necessarily for the aviation sector. I'm talking about SDG 5 as a whole, for all the streams. There is a lack of data. So in our sector of transport, and in particular aviation, we have to make the effort jointly to collect the data, monitor the progress to achieve our goals. Now, ICAO is not new to data, and all our aviation partners as well, and the industry as well. We have, for ICAO, we have been recognized as a leader on gathering, monitoring, and analyzing different data sources relevant to our core work. Now, it is recognized to the point that even within the 2030 Agenda Framework, ICAO was selected as the custodian agency for Global Indicator 9 related to passenger and freight volumes by mode of transport. To achieve the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, it will be necessary to have gender or diversity embedded in an organization's strategic planning. In support of the resolution A3930, ICAO Gender Equality Programme, promoting the participation of women in the global aviation sector and its commitment to enhancing gender equality by 2030, ICAO and its member states, together with international aviation partners representing the industry, we need to work together in the development and the collection of gender-related data. Member states are already encouraged by the resolution to share data voluntarily as well as best practices. However, we need to team up with our aviation partners and perhaps share this information, perhaps on a common platform or a shared platform that would include goals, targets, and indicators. The data could be used to benchmark actions to accelerate this gender equality and inform policymaking. When we talked about goals, targets, and indicators, I think we've heard from on session 1 the speaker from the Executive Director of the Spanish Aviation Safety Security Agency calling for the same thing as well. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think for me, I love that there's a very definitive call to action and that we can do more together collectively. Our next speaker, she's going to be speaking in Spanish, and I'd love to introduce you to Ana Pamela Suarez from Argentina. She's the advisor to air transport in the Ministry of Interior and Transport, but she's also the president for investigations of civil aviation accidents. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Sorry, my presentation is in Spanish. Well, primero quiero decirles muchísimas gracias por la invitación a OASIS principalmente y a las organizaciones de este gran foro. La verdad que llevo más de 20 años en la administración pública y estoy hoy muy emocionada de poder participar en un foro como este. Creo que es la primera vez que siento que es tan importante que nuestras palabras y nuestra voz sea escuchada. Vengo de la administración pública y en la aviación es uno de los sectores donde más he sentido la discriminación. Por eso es tan importante que hoy estemos presentes tantas mujeres y hombres comprometidos con este tema. Cuando armé la presentación dije, bueno, ¿cómo empezar? ¿No? Y un poco hablar del desarrollo y desarrollo sostenible desde la inclusión de género. Primero empezar diciendo que no somos iguales mujeres y hombres. Fisiológicamente no somos iguales. Pensamos, sentimos de maneras diferentes, tenemos estructuras de pensamiento que pueden ser diversas, pero también entre los hombres no son iguales y entre las mujeres no son iguales. Es decir, nosotros estamos hablando que todos los seres humanos somos diferentes y tenemos cualidades propias. ¿Y por qué digo esto? ¿Quiere decir que no podemos hacer las mismas cosas? No, justamente podemos hacer las mismas cosas y quizás mejorar el resultado. ¿De qué manera? Para nosotros es importante saber que la inclusión de género tiene que ver con el complemento. Si podemos hacer todos las mismas cosas, seguramente un trabajo en equipo y complementario puede tener muchos mejores resultados. Porque podemos incorporarles lo que nosotros le llamamos la mirada femenina, ¿no? Hay muchos aspectos del liderazgo femenino a tener en cuenta y que pueden mejorar muchísimo los resultados. Hay algunos casos concretos, porque no es solo palabras lo que uno trata de explicar, sino que hace poco una representante del proyecto de Naciones Unidas de Noruega nos contaba, que estuvo presente en nuestro país, nos contaba que Noruega ha logrado incrementar su Producto Bruto Interno gracias a la política de inclusión femenina. El 75% del mercado laboral hoy lo ocupan las mujeres. Y eso es gracias a que se ha planificado conscientemente desde el Estado la importancia de la inclusión de género y de la igualdad de género en los distintos aspectos de políticas públicas. En Argentina tenemos solo el 47% del mercado laboral. ¿Y esto es solamente para países desarrollados? No. Cuando le hicimos esta pregunta nos explicaba que hacía 70 años Noruega era un país muy pobre. Y hoy está entre los países más ricos del mundo, con un producto per cápita de $67.000 por año. Es decir, se puede. En aviación, como ya les explicamos y también venimos escuchando, tenemos una materia pendiente muy importante, la inclusión. Y históricamente es un sector más masculino, si se quiere decir, sobre todo en la toma de decisiones. Incluso en países como Argentina o en Latinoamérica, que venimos de una cultura, de una tradición muy militar, quizás se acentúa un poco más este tema. ¿Cuál es la visión? ¿Qué es lo que nos está pasando a nosotros los argentinos? Aerolíneas Argentina, por ejemplo, es una de la aerolínea de bandera, tiene un porcentaje alto de participación de mujeres en su staff, pero si ustedes ven en pantalla, tiene muy poca participación en pilotos, una participación más o menos parecida en gerenciamiento y sectores operacionales, y en sectores más altos, ¿cuál es el administrativo? Lo mismo pasa a nivel general. Tenemos solamente 22 pilotos mujeres en un total de 1.623 pilotos de aviación comercial. A pesar de que en el último año la cantidad de pilotos se incrementó en un 63%, no pasó lo mismo con el género femenino. Otras empresas, como una nueva empresa del Estado de Control Aéreo, ha incluido diversidad en su plan de acción y ha realizado diferentes acciones concretas que van a tener resultados quizás en el corto plazo. Yo soy la titular del organismo de investigación de accidentes y me ha tocado desarrollar cuestiones de género en mi organismo, un organismo que tiene más de 64 años de historia y que recién, pasados los 60 años, incorporó su primer investigadora mujer. Hoy contamos con un 13% del personal de investigación femenino, pero no existía hasta hace solo 5 años. Tiene un alto nivel de ejecutivos dentro del organismo femenino y también tiene un staff, un personal de un 33%. Fue necesario pensar en el género y obviamente también facilitó que el liderazgo sea femenino. ¿Pero fue fácil? En lo personal fue muy difícil. Hubo muchísimas cuestiones, sobre todo públicas, respecto de que una mujer conduzca un organismo de investigación de accidentes tan técnicos que parecía que era solo para hombres. Y una mujer que no viniera del área técnica, sino que viniera más del área administrativa y política, que es lo que por ahí se necesitan los líderes para conducir organizaciones. Pero eso no nos detuvo. Y se lograron muchos resultados. Hoy no solamente tenemos el organismo de investigación, sino que también coordinamos un mecanismo de investigación en Latinoamérica. Hemos tenido varios reconocimientos y hacemos foros de seguridad muy importantes, los más importantes de Latinoamérica, con más de 500, 600 participantes. Pero lo más importante de todo es que nuestro producto, que no es la investigación, sino es que es la recomendación al sistema de aviación, pasó de tener un 5% de resultados, o sea, de respuesta, a tener un 80% de respuesta. Es decir, que el sistema se comprometió con las recomendaciones del organismo. El resultado fue muy positivo en solo 5 años. ¿Y esto se hizo por ser mujer? No. Se hizo por ser un equipo donde participan mujeres y hombres, y es un resultado de un equipo que quizás lo hace visible un titular mujer, pero sí permite tener una visión diferente respecto del trabajo en conjunto. Nuestra región tiene muchísimos desafíos y ha incluido dentro de sus desafíos la igualdad de género. Y en igual proporción de todo el esfuerzo que estamos poniendo en la mayor conectividad, en la independencia de las instituciones y en el aprovechamiento del capital humano, debemos poner ese esfuerzo en la igualdad de género. Y es un privilegio para mí poder estar en este momento. Escuchaba desde el principio y me emocionó decir, el tiempo es ahora. Todos los que ocupamos diferentes lugares, sea cual fueran nuestras organizaciones, tenemos el privilegio de poder estar en un momento de acción para lograr lo que buscamos. Sobre todo derribar esas barreras que nos hacen tan débiles como sociedad. Nos convierte en sociedades débiles, porque como vimos antes, nuestras sociedades pueden sentirse mucho más beneficiadas con la participación del género femenino. Y obviamente la aviación, mucho más, porque la aviación es un conector y un multiplicador de los esfuerzos. En nuestro país, por ejemplo, la desocupación tiene un 11% en mujeres, mientras que en varones solamente un 6%. La diferencia en el salario es un 27% respecto del hombre, solamente salario formal. Cuando vamos a lo informal, pasa a ser prácticamente el 40%, por iguales situaciones o iguales labores. Y a su vez las posiciones jerárquicas poco a poco están tomando consideración. pero la verdad que tenemos un porcentaje muy bajo, un 37%. ¿Y qué nos pasa a las mujeres cuando tenemos que ocupar un lugar de liderazgo? No tenemos ejemplos. Nuestros líderes son hombres. Y lo primero que nos dicen, o por lo menos me ha pasado personalmente, es decir, tenés que ser dura, no tenés que mostrar debilidad, tenés que tomar decisiones fríamente, tenés que dejar de ser mujer. Y no es la manera, tenemos que ser mujer y aportar nuestras cualidades de mujer en la toma de decisiones. Promover iniciativas, eliminar prejuicios. Hablamos muchísimo en el panel anterior del sesgo. ¿Cuántos sesgos y cuántos juicios tenemos? Principalmente sobre nosotras mismas. Utilizar métodos de selección diferentes son todos desafíos y el Estado tiene un rol importante, como decía una de las oradoras en el panel anterior. ¿Por qué tiene un rol importante? Porque la legislación es la base de muchos de los cambios. La legislación es el compromiso principal que después debemos acompañar con el resto de las acciones individuales. Lo que le mostré que estaba haciendo Argentina en cada una de sus organizaciones no es suficiente. Necesitamos un Estado presente, un Estado convencido de la igualdad de género. Y nuestro país emprendió ese camino. Creó en el 2017 un Instituto Nacional para las Mujeres, tratando de fomentar todo el proceso de inclusión en el área de desarrollo social, pero no era suficiente, no era transversal. Necesitábamos algo que sea realmente transversal a todas las actividades. En aviación principalmente necesitábamos una decisión fuerte de política de Estado respecto de cómo hacer para incentivar a cada uno de los actores o a cada una de las mujeres que ingresan al mercado laboral a entender que tenía la posibilidad dentro de nuestro sector y que podía crecer. También se hicieron cuestiones de cupos, hablamos también de los cupos, y los cupos, por ejemplo, en las candidaturas políticas. Pasamos de un 30% a un 50%. Pero lo más importante que hicimos fue presentar en marzo de este año un proyecto de ley que claramente promueva la oportunidad laboral en igualdad de género y que tenga presente las garantías, tanto sea de extensión de licencia, las garantías de igualdad de género en mismas condiciones laborales, cuestiones de remuneración, como así también en garantías constitucionales respecto de la gremialización. Fue poner sobre la mesa una política concreta, que hoy está en discusión, como muchas discusiones que estamos dando por derechos y por género femenino. Esto es nuestro pie inicial y nos va a dar la base para que en aviación podamos ser mucho más fuertes en la pelea por ser todos iguales. Diferentes cada uno en sus individualidades, pero iguales en las oportunidades que tengamos que tener. Nosotros decimos que esta frase es la que más nos gusta y es algo que charlamos permanentemente con el equipo. No queremos que las mujeres tengan más poder que los hombres, queremos que las mujeres se empoderen. Queremos que las mujeres sepan que pueden y tengamos la posibilidad de poder hablar y de poder que nuestra voz se escuche en todos los sectores. Muchísimas gracias.
Great job.
Gracias, Pamela. I think that was a really fantastic presentation. And for me, I think the takeaway for me was that what you were doing in Argentina it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And that sets up Jane Hoskinson very nicely, because she is a lady after my own heart. Jane currently works as Director of Learning and Development at IATA, which covers all things from diversity and inclusion on the agenda as well. So, Jane, are you trying to hop along?
Okay. I am. Okay, I'm just going to move these down because I'm not quite as tall as everybody else. Okay, so thank you very much for inviting us to speak here. I've got a question for the audience, and it's probably one of the only times that I'll get lots of hands, but how many, when you were a kid, the age of 7, said, I want to be a pilot? Quite a few of you. And how many of you made it? Okay, good job. Because I wanted to just share my own story. So I took my first flight at the age of 7. And two things came out of that flight. The first was I decided it was always better to sit at the front of the aircraft. Now that's not because as a 7-year-old I had a taste for first and club class. It was that when I took my first flight, all the smokers were at the back of the airplane. Do you remember those days of the smoker's fog? And the second thing was I said, I want to be a pilot, because it was also the days where we were able to go into the cockpit. So you may remember as a child, you went into the cockpit of a plane, and it's amazing. It's absolutely mesmerizing to go there. Now, of course, I think about children now who can't go and do that. And how do we give them exposure to the excitement that it is the very first time you go in a cockpit? So kind of my dream at 7 was to become a pilot. And at the age of 18, I had my first flying lesson. And I had that before I had a driving lesson, because I was more interested in learning to fly than I was to learn to drive. And then I went to university. And the reality hit me that the flying lessons were not going to carry on, and that I actually had to focus and study. But that didn't stop me thinking, when I graduate, my ambitions had got a bit better. I decided that I wanted to be not just a pilot, but a Red Arrows pilot. So if any of you have seen the Red Arrows, they do all of the stunt displays in the UK, and that meant that I would have to join the military. I wasn't so keen on that, but I really wanted to be a Red Arrows pilot. Now, two things got in the way of that. I set up my interview after I'd graduated from university, and pretty quickly, two things happened. They said, stand here against this measuring stick and stand on the scales. And they said, well, you're not tall enough. And actually, at a very svelte 50 kilos, I didn't weigh enough either. So I've been working on one of those two things ever since. But I haven't even been able to get the height, which meant that effectively, right there in that moment, my dream died. So how is it that 20 plus years later, I'm standing actually talking to you about an industry that I'm really passionate about, talking to people that do great jobs in aviation, in an industry that we're really struggling to get lots of talent in. So actually, did my dream die at all? Not really, because it's an absolute honor to be here talking to you about how do we get more women interested in this industry, every single level of activity that we do, not just in the cockpit, but in every part of the chain of aviation. And I think this is where the Sustainable Development Goals are really important. And one of the keys for understanding how we do that is around data. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what do we do at IATA around data, and how do we use it in order to kind of help us put together better programs for diversity and inclusion. So IATA, we have a program called Mosaic, and Mosaic is designed to represent our diversity and inclusion plans. So we don't focus exclusively on gender, but gender is one of our key priorities. And what we look at there is we look around 4 pillars. So we take a look at culture. So I was really interested in the conversation earlier around unconscious bias. We've done a lot of work on getting people through some training programs. So I actually now look after learning and development, through training programs to help them understand unconscious bias. So we address what is the culture that we want to achieve in order to create a diverse and inclusive workforce. Anton Grove spoke earlier around some of the people processes that we are putting in place, and that we're making sure that we reduce bias in those people processes. So how do we make sure that we have enough women in the pool when we're making recruitment decisions? How do we appeal to women to take those jobs? Because we know from the research that's done, a woman won't apply for a job unless she is 100% sure she fulfills all of the criteria. And it's not quite 100% when gents apply for a job. It's something closer to 60 or 50%. So how do we encourage women to say, I know I do not fulfill 100% of the criteria, but I'm still going to put myself forward for this role? So we look at people process with, we're taking a look at flexible working. Do we have enough flexibility on our working? We've put in place some mentoring programs. So we've done reverse mentoring. What we look at, how do we make sure that new people coming in are actually involved in mentoring? We also look at what's the external impact? So this is one of the reasons that we're here. We believe that we can do more collectively when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and that's really important. And the final thing, which I'm going to go into a bit more detail about, is we look at data. So we do monitoring and reporting of our own data. Now, I'm sure that many of you also look at your own internal data. And the thing I love about data and statistics is that it can tell you very many different pictures. So a statistic I came across the other day was that 42.6% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So just take that piece of salt as I'm talking through the IATA data. We're 99.9% sure our data is right, but there's always a margin of error. Obviously, we start with what is the picture that we have for gender balance in IATA. I think we have a gender picture that's something to be quite proud of. We are 48% females and 52% males. So it's very, very interesting when we look at we're meant to be representative of the industry, but actually we have a very good gender balance in what we do internally. And so how can we help the industry understand and get them better at doing their gender balance as well? But that actually tells us nothing at all. So it sounds really great, for sure, but when you dig in the data, what you tend to look at is, okay, well, what's the distribution of the females around the organization? And that's really important. It's probably going to be no surprise to you that we've got more women in junior roles than we have senior roles. And that's why at our senior levels, our Director General has made a commitment that we will have women into the final panels. And that doesn't compromise our meritocracy, but it's about making sure that pipeline of talent is there. Two other interesting areas of data that we believe are really important to look at. So we actually take a data lens through our performance management system. And you might think, well, why do you do that? Because we want to see if there's bias in there. We want to see if people are recognizing their own genders or being biased against different genders. And that's, again, a really good picture, because there is a slight difference. There's a 1% difference in our exceptional performers, and our females tend to perform 1% more than our males, and that's then reflected in the bonus and pay. So we talked about the gender gap, which we know in the aviation industry. The UK's done some very, very strong research on gender pay gaps. We know that it is not where it should be in any way, shape, or form. But we don't look at gender pay. What we look at is bonus and what merit awards and what cost of living awards are awarded. And again, we are very, very confident that we are equal in the way that we do that. So that's great news. We're doing some things really right. And they're all best practices that we can help transfer to the industry. But what I say about that data is data only gives us so much. What we really need for the industry is looking at kind of data analytics and insights. So are we making sure that the pipeline of talent is there? Where are we losing people through the pipeline of talent? What are the jobs that people don't feel attracted to coming into? So from a learning and development point of view, you may be familiar that IATA Training is a very, very big training institution. And we've been having conversations around, well, do we know what that demographic profile looks like? That's really interesting, because as soon as we get to know that, we start to think about, is the differences in the way in which males and females learn? And yes, there is. So you can see it in the way children learn. Girls will be very inhibited to try things unless they can get it right, and boys will kind of play with stuff in a way that girls don't tend to. So how are we making sure that we're not putting bias into the way that we develop learning and making it accessible for different people? We've had a number of kind of successful initiatives where we've looked at how do we support parents. So we look at data through how many parents do we have, and I say that word really importantly. I think Donna was talking about earlier, parental leave. We recently made an offer to provide working parents who've just had a baby support as they come back into the workplace. Now, why is that important? Because it's not just a mum's job when she comes back to work. It's also a burden on the dad. But the third person in that relationship is the manager. So how do we educate managers and understand with managers how we bring people back into the workplace? And again, the more data that you've got around how many working parents you've got, the easier it is to put the right programs in place. And I think that that's what's really important for us, is data helps us make better decisions when we do really good analytics on it and we make decisions. Having the data and saying, well, there's 10% of females in the pilot workforce and not doing anything with it is, to my mind, where we are missing out. We have to be clear that we can take actions that will help drive a change. And that's why I think that what we need to do is we need to look at it from an industry point of view. We need to look at it from an organizational point of view, because not one size will fit all. You'll all have, your different organizations will have different problems that need addressing. Now, one of the key problems that we talk about and that we identify is getting women interested in tech and technology and getting them into tech roles. So has anyone heard of a hackathon? Do you know what a hackathon is? Who knows what a hackathon is? Okay, a few of you. So there's a bias about hackathons that it's all young kids wearing hoodies and trying to crack into your systems. And that isn't exactly true. We use hackathons as a way of rapidly creating new content. So I just wanted to share with you a short video where we took the data from our hackathons and said, this is pretty interesting. We've got some really great people participating in our hackathons, but there's not very many women. So in Washington earlier this year, we decided to try and focus on a far more gender-balanced hackathon. Our ambition, and it was an ambition, was to get an all-female hackathon. It was really, really hard. So we kind of brought our ambition down a little bit and said, let's get 50%, which was still a 30% increase over previous hackathons, to actually get more women into a room, to get them more interested in technology, and actually expose technology students, female technology students, to the industry itself. So I think there's some interesting lessons that you'll be able to take from this when we show the video. I'm just going to show the video in a minute. And that's around, once you identify the problem, come up with creative solutions for how to do it. It's really easy for us to say, girls aren't interested, how do we get them interested? But we also have an onus on ourselves to find creative solutions to get girls more interested in coming into this industry. And it will be different in different places. There'll be different cultural aspects that you need to think about, but the onus sits with us to share our passion and enthusiasm, because although my dream died when they said you're not tall enough and you're maybe not big enough to go in a Red Arrows jet, actually it didn't die, because I'm still passionate about this industry, and it's a complete honor to me to be talking to you about how do we get more people passionate like all of us to come into the industry. So I'm just going to show the video, and I hope you enjoy it as an example of what we're doing to get more women involved.
There's a Chinese proverb that says that 50% of the sky is held up by women, and 50% of today's technology users are women. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at the stats, there's still a huge disparity in the number of women in technology. So I think we need to do more. There's indications that it's moving in the right direction, but we see that only 5% of leadership roles in technology, in IT, are represented by women. So what needs to be done is at the school levels, they need to have campaigns, a systematic approach to how they're going to encourage girls to partake in technology. And some of the things that we've seen as well is that some women later on have been put off by going into a technology field because it's so male-dominated. And what we're trying to do is take women who are role models in technology to disparage and to dispel the myth that it's a male-dominated industry. what can happen if you don't have women in the development of IT and products and services. If you recall, when there was the advent, the bags in the cars, when the airbags were deployed, there was a higher incidence of injuries to children and women. And why do you think that is? It was because they were developed, designed, and tested by men. There was an unconscious bias, and they thought about men when they were doing all of the testing. And lo and behold, we found that a lot of this contributed to the fact that there were more injuries with children and with women. So it's really important that women be involved, and that can lead to tangible results. It's not only the right thing to do, but it affects your bottom line. IATA is doing a lot in this sector of promoting gender diversity, but what I want to make clear is that the issue of gender diversity in aviation is not an IATA problem. It's an industry situation. There's really no industry perspective on this. We are taking measures to promote unconscious bias, and not only at regional levels, but our senior leadership team has put concrete actions in place that will be deployed by the end of this year, where you start seeing in the hiring process where we will provide more opportunities for women. But again, it's not about men against women. It's about how you bring them together and the best candidate for the job. Because we don't believe in quotas. We believe on bringing in the best person for the opportunity. But we want to give women a level playing field to have an opportunity to show what they're made of and what they can contribute to the organization.
Thank you so much, and that was a fantastic video. I've done a lot of hackathons as well, so it's always fun to see the outcomes. But I think for me, what is a really great takeaway is that it's not just important for us to get data, because I mean, sometimes we're living in a data-scarce environment, but it's also what we do with that data. So only 6% of pilots globally was the stat this morning that was said. So what? Right? And so what's the tangible action that we take next? And so I've got the pleasure of our final panelist, Dr. Thea Graham, and she is the Strategic Global Forum Liaison for the Federal Aviation Administration. Well, that's a tongue twister in itself. We're just going to call it FAA because everybody now knows what FAA is, Air Traffic Organization's International Office, and is the first woman chair of the ICAO North Atlantic Economic Finance and Forecast Group.
Congratulations, you did it.
Actually, there was a tongue twister, it's a mouthful. I'm actually quite proud, but I'm just more proud of all your accomplishments. So please, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon. I know it's hard. You've been sitting for a long time, and thank you for your patience. I wanted to thank the organizers. I just happened to be in South Africa at the same time as this conference and was given the opportunity to share with you some of the insights and data that FAA collects on gender equality within our organization. So just to show you, this is actually my boss, Terry Bristol. She's the Chief Operating Officer of the Air Traffic Organization. And in her last fiscal year 2017 report, it's the ATO Diversity and Inclusion Annual Report. She made this comment about gender equality, and I'm not usually one to read a slide, but I thought this would be important for this summit. She said we should make a concerted effort to recruit more female candidates and promote career opportunities for girls and young women in fields like science, technology, engineering, and math, and that's the STEM fields. We must continually track and analyze diversity trends, identify and eliminate any barriers to achieve a professional and diverse workforce. And at the FAA, we take this seriously. I just wanted to show you how FAA is meeting the goal. we take an effort at least every year and every month to communicate the principles of the Equal Opportunity Employment Act, which was enacted in the U.S. In 1972. And it was enacted to eliminate workplace discrimination. With that in mind, and using the principles, we have continuing education for both management and employees. It's not always pleasant to take time away from your duties, but we're continuously updating and improving our efforts for gender equality and diversity. FAA supports several women associations, and this just is an example of some of the ones that we support. It's the Professional Women Controllers, the Technical Women's Organization, and Women in Aviation Organization. We also promote inclusion of women and minorities with our STEM internships. And then also we have a program, it's called our FAA Centers of Excellence. We support future aviation leaders with this program, and what we do is we've identified certain areas of investigation or areas that we need research in, and we work with universities and support the universities through research. I actually have benefited with this program and actually hired several very wonderful women, very highly educated and intelligent women into the FAA workforce. We also, one program that we do is an international visitors program. And I just wanted to mention that we're trying to work through our office in Dakar to offer this type of program to women in Africa. So hopefully we can bring that up at the summit. And the most important thing to me, of course, and as emphasized by Terry Bristol, is we want to analyze data and report the trends. So at the FAA, we do collect data through our Federal Personnel and Payroll System, is the FPPS. And this is an all-inclusive human resources database. So we can pull out demographics, salary, length of service, we have grade levels, we know where they are living in the US, and just to see and monitor how we're doing across our workforce, because we are one of the largest air navigation service providers on the globe. So data is always our friend. We also collect the Civil Airman Statistics report. So these are reports on pilots and also non-pilot occupations. These are the people that we have to have registrations from in order to operate in the United States. And as I mentioned before, FAA is a very large organization. We have over 45,000 full-time employees. Our air traffic controllers make up the majority of our workforce, and they're at approximately 42%. This is our latest statistics. Air traffic controllers are 42% of our workforce, and it's almost 19,000 air traffic controllers. And that includes our developmentals, our professional workers, and also some of the management. Below that comes the next largest group is our transportation specialists, and that mainly is our infrastructure technicians, and they take up about 15% of our workforce. Safety inspectors are next and comprise about 9% of our workforce, and engineers are about the same, both of them are both 9%. Another large category of occupations we have is called other. And other incorporates just like the rest of us, including myself. I'm an economist, so I ended up in the other situation. So that includes HR specialists, policy, administrative, any of our support employees within the FAA. So I took these statistics and ran a few little queries to see what our share of women are in the workforce in the FAA. And what we found in our most latest data, which was actually, I just pulled it this week, is that 17% of our air traffic controllers are women. So approximately 3,200 air traffic controllers, women represent that share. Our transportation specialist is actually a very difficult job, making sure that the infrastructure is maintained. We only have about 613 women supporting our infrastructure, and it's approximately 9% of the total workforce. Safety inspectors comprise about 8% of the workforce, and engineers is much higher, at 12% of our engineering workforce. Our overhead and other employees, actually women represent 53% of that workforce. So comprising all of with all these occupations, women represent about 23% of the workforce at the FAA. So it's almost 11,000 employees. I was a little afraid to do this calculation, but I wanted to look at the wage gap between female and male salaries. Because we're a government organization, it may be different in private sector type or the different types of air navigation service providers, but everything is under regulation. Very happily, I was looking at these, and we do go from a range from about 86% to a high of 106%. So some women are actually earning more men on average at the FAA. If you look at air traffic controllers, they're a heavily unionized group. The range that we calculated was approximately between 96% and 103%, of the wage gap for women and men. For women, engineers ranged about the same, and then other had a much higher percentage of 106%. Where we need to check and look is our transportation specialists and safety inspectors. It's a much smaller group of women in those occupations. So some more research. I mean, this was kind of a preliminary look at the numbers. I'm not sure that we've actually ever released any of these type of statistics. The second data set that we look at is a civil airman statistics. And this particular table just looks at the pilots and the category of pilots that we're following. Of total pilots that have registered in the United States, 7% of the pilots are women. If you look at students, looks like there's some up-and-coming growth. Students, almost 13% of student pilots are women. And then if you look at the commercial pilots, 6.4% of commercial pilots are women in the United States. So that was just a snapshot of statistics from 2017. But what you really need to look at is some trends. So when we're looking at the trends for active pilots, you've seen a growth of approximately 13% between 2008 and 2017 of women pilots. Back in 2008, women pilots represented about 6.2% of pilots flying in the U.S., and today it's about 7%. And as you notice, as we all know, we have a shortage of pilots across the globe. We're looking at these statistics, and the total numbers stayed approximately the same between 2008 and 2017. So as I looked at this data, actually this is not really part of my job, but it's a very interesting part. There's more that can be done. And one thing I wanted to emphasize, at least in this briefing, is that these data have pointed out some gaps and some opportunities that not just the FAA, but the globe can look at. I mean, as I pointed out earlier, women comprise about 23% of the FAA workforce. Obviously, we need to do something to increase that percentage. We know we can do better. And unfortunately, when we looked at the STEM positions, even though we have several programs in place, it seems that percentage is lagging far behind. The share of active women pilots have increased from 6.2% to 7% in 2017, but we need to address that and increase it more as we face a shortage of pilots. There's opportunities for young women, who want to fly and want to take that adventure, into the air. It's there, and not only is FAA promoting that, but we've also had in our new FAA reauthorization bill, they are setting up a Women in Aviation task force, and FAA will be more involved in promoting aviation to young women and promote pilots and also air traffic control. The data that we do collect, I think we can use this to design metrics to measure progress. This was just a cursory view of what we have. More can be done, and I think it's a great launching point for all of us to get together and discuss how can we measure our success. Because we know, and we've all talked about how there's a need, but in order to show that there's a success, you need to have data behind that to support you and support moving forward with new programs. One question that we discussed in our telecons is that, hey, can this data collection system be duplicated elsewhere? I mean, I have to admit, especially with our human resource collection, it's a very expensive system. In smaller countries, a lot of things may still be on paper, but if we want to move forward and continue the progress and also help aviation continue, with new pilots, and recruit new pilots, we need to put it in databases that we can measure our successes and also find gaps that we can address. Reports need to be more widely distributed within the FAA. And because surprisingly, we have, I know tomorrow is Women's Day in South Africa. We have a Women's Month in March, and we show success stories, but we don't show the statistics behind it. So a lot of these reports that I have shown to you that are reported, they go up to senior management, but they aren't shared with the rest of the FAA. One problem that I also did notice with the data is that this reflects quantitative measures and not qualitative measures. To reflect qualitative measures and how work life is going for women in the workforce, especially in the FAA workforce, we need to do survey type work to find out what we can do and how we can move forward. So I wanted to keep that. I didn't know if I was too short or too long, but but I wanted to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to finishing the rest of and meeting the rest of you at this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for me, there's a few takeaways, and it's not just that data is important, and yes, these exercises are expensive, right? If we think about it from a pure cost perspective, but if we think about it as an investment into better policies and practices, then actually the cost becomes an irrelevant discussion. And so we've only got 10 minutes left. We have literally gone from SDGs at the World Bank, what we're doing very high level. We talked about, and again, how we need to start thinking about gender inclusivity instead of gender neutrality, to really, and what I loved about ICAO, what you're doing is mapping your strategic objectives to the SDGs, to the case study of Argentina, and that it was not easy, but they have done it, to Jane, what you guys are doing around diversity and inclusion, and even bringing younger people in hackathons, to finally how we start to actually get good data, right, and how we start to tell the stories through data. That's kind of very quickly a snapshot of what has occurred through the last hour with our panel. And so I'm going to take out my magic wand, and I'm going to make you each president of everything. Okay? Because I get to do that because I'm the moderator. And if there's one thing that you can change, if there's one thing that our community here can take away, if there's one concrete action that you'd like to see ignited through this process, what would that be? And I'll sprinkle a little bit of magic dust so that I make you president of everything. President of the world with absolute power and unlimited budget. Wouldn't everybody like to have that power? Jane, because you are right next to me, I'm going to pick on you and ask you to kick it off.
Well, I guess really this is a brilliant summit, but my real wish is that we never had to have summits like this because it was dealt with, and the magic one was equality everywhere. As we're talking about data, then I'm going to make my wish around transparent shared access to data, and I think collectively we have that in our power to share it and not be proprietary about the information. So I would ask for shared data across all of our organizations, because once we share it, get a better picture. Once we get a better picture, we can take concrete actions and really understand where the levers are.
Okay. Fantastic. Pamela.
Bueno, no sé si se escucha. Hola. Bueno, desde mi punto de vista, creo que lo más importante es no solamente compartir datos, que creo que es fundamental y también nos permite hacer lo que venimos a buscar, la acción. Creo que necesitamos un mayor compromiso con la acción, más allá de las discusiones, sino ser concretos en nuestra tarea y también trabajar mucho en el fomento del empoderamiento de la mujer, en cada uno, desde el lugar donde trabaja, desde el lugar donde puede la posibilidad de alzar su voz, convencer a la mujer que puede.
Fantastic. Edward?
Okay, I think seeing as I've got unlimited spending power,
yes.
and I showed that we can actually be investing a lot more in programs, I think what we should be looking at is how we can engender a cultural shift in the STEM fields. While we can look to encourage school-going girls to enter into the STEM fields, Naadiya, we spoke earlier, the challenge is keeping them in the STEM fields.
Yeah.
You find many universities, they actually have reasonable representation in undergraduates and in postgraduates. But 5 years into the job, they thin out. The women are gone from the engineering consultancies, from the tech fields, you know, and they head off to McKinsey or KPMG, God forbid. Yeah, we need to look at how we can engender that cultural change, because I think that's what will help to keep women in STEM.
Fantastic. And a man after my own heart here. And then Henry.
Well, I'd like to build on what Jane was saying, and I really liked that she was talking about the data. Data is powerful, and I think it's really good if not only share it, but let's be transparent with it. Let everyone see how everyone is doing on data in this particular area. And so transparency, sharing it, and ideally if we can come to a common platform or share or using the same data fields so that we can build on this data.
Fantastic. And then
well, if I had one wish, I actually just want to follow up on what Edward has said. You know, just from our previous session, it would be wonderful to figure out how we can keep women inclusive in the workforce. And he's absolutely right. You know, after 5 years, you do see that thin out. So if we can find out that reason with data-driven analysis, I think that we can move forward and get a more equitable distribution within all of our systems, as well as share data. I can never go away from data. So.
And so with that, we wrap up the session. You've been a fantastic audience to sit here up until the end and be engaged and laugh at my jokes, so I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. And then to my panel, thank you so much for your insights that you've shared, and specifically with your wish list. I mean, when I looked at it, I was really thinking, you know, let's go and start a new planet somewhere, because there was unlimited budget, but no one was nobody wants to go and live in another planet with me, so it's just me then. And so, you know, if we can as a community just start to be open and transparent, to share our data, and to actually start to use that data to track and see how we can actually break down the barriers for women in STEM fields and more generally the aviation industry, that's going to be the win and the takeaway. Thank you so much.
I actually open it up because there's 2 numbers on it. All right. So as we close the day, Naadiya, I'm told that you have got questions, possibly. I don't know where my clicker is, but oh no. And my clicker is no longer with me. It's not this one. Pardon? Okay, is it already on? Okay. The person who is seated in seat number 56. 56? Ah, there you are. I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask a question to this final panel. And can the person who is seated in seat number 102, 102, can I see your hand? 102, I can't see you. Oh, there she is alongst the aisle. Hi there. I will also give you the next opportunity to ask a question. Again, ladies, can we keep them quick and crisp? Because as Naadiya indicated, this is the session that stands between us and our networking cocktail.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's not a question, it's more a practical issue. The authorities of the states can provide the information, the data collection about the women in different professional aspects. And I would like to have the standardized tables in order to fill every country with this data, because if we work individually, at the end, we have not the standardized the data. And I would like if ICAO can provide us the definitions of every field of professional, females and men, and the authorities of every country, we can provide this information and this homogeneous between countries. It's only a practical issue. Thank you.
All right. Can I maybe take the question from 102 and we'll get the panel to answer them at the same time and close?
I can't understand it.
She was asking.
You are on, my dear. If your light is red, you are with us. Nothing. There we go. I've got a red light on your microphone.
Hello?
There we go.
Yes. I was just wondering, specifically, how do you see the role of men in this equation? I mean, we speak a lot about the programs, the policies, but I'm just curious to hear your opinion. How do men specifically feed into this equation? And what do you think that men in organizations and in these structures can specifically do in order to move the agenda forward?
All right. Members of the panel, did you hear the question?
Yeah.
Fantastic. If we can have just 2 responses from the panel and then close it up. Thank you.
Do you want Okay, so I mean, I think that's really important. And I started when I was talking about what we do at IATA. We very deliberately actually called it diversity and inclusion, because the very worst thing you can do is, as soon as you create one group, you automatically exclude another group. And so we've worked very hard for, and this is internal, but I think the lessons are relevant everywhere, is to not exclude other people, because otherwise you're just talking to an echo chamber. And guess what? When you talk in an echo chamber, it sounds really great because you're hearing the things that you want to hear, but it actually doesn't take you forward, because you've got to be able to get diverse points of view so that you can see other perspectives. And it's all about creating allies and supporters for the issues without actually excluding them. So I think it's really important in the way that we position the language, so it doesn't feel like we're excluding other people.
Thank you very much. And to the second question, thank you.
Bueno, no quería sumar un poco a esa pregunta, si es posible. Creo que el papel de la comunicación respecto del rol y del género es fundamental para que no se sientan excluidos. Cuando hablábamos antes, por lo menos en la experiencia personal, el trabajo en equipo es posible con hombres y mujeres, no solo con mujeres o solo con hombres. Entonces, para mí, tratar de trasladar al hombre que tiene la posibilidad de crecer mucho más cuando incluye a la mujer, creo que es fundamental. Es como en la familia, digamos. El hombre en la familia también tiene que cumplir un lugar muy especial para darle el lugar a la mujer, ¿no? Y bueno, trasladarlo a nuestras organizaciones creo que es fundamental. Y respecto a la segunda pregunta, que es un poco la estandarización de datos, creo que coincido en la posibilidad de tener a través de OASI un estándar de recolección de datos para que los estados puedan tener una estandarización de carga, ¿no? Y poder analizar mucho mejor los datos.
All right, and thank you very much. And thank you to the two ladies who did post their questions this afternoon. We do appreciate it. As said previously, our panel guests, as well as our moderators and a few of our speakers are still here with us. So please do strategically surveil them. I never use the word stalk at the networking event this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, what a day. But what a beautiful, insightful, as well as, you know, just such an enriching day. I feel like I walked in knowing what I needed to about aviation, but I feel like as I leave, there's just so much to unpick, unlearn, relearn, and to redesign about how we think about the role of women in the different spaces and through the different dynamics of this truly exciting sector that each of you have the privilege to work through. Just to throw forward to tomorrow, we're going to be speaking about everything from culture to education, the role of STEM, innovation, technology, education, and the role of skills development specifically in this sector, as well as looking at the various dynamics of everybody who plays a role in progressing the agenda of women, particularly in the workplace in relation to policy and growing the strength of our institutions to be far more vocal in their advocacy of gender issues. I loved the point that was raised today about big data, and we've seen that the new superpower is certainly owning access to information, but perhaps our biggest responsibility as we sit as the audience as well as up here on stage today is taking this information and making useful knowledge out of it that allows us to go back into our spaces and make a meaningful impact. I look forward to being here bright and early tomorrow morning, and I certainly hope each of you will be back too. And I'm looking forward to another day of great learning, of great conversations, and great energy, of course. Have a restful evening. Have a bit of fun this evening as well at the Welcome Cocktail, very kindly sponsored this evening by the Air Traffic Navigation Services of South Africa. Thank you to them again. And we will see you then. Don't forget Tomorrow evening, we have the gala dinner at the end of the evening. So any emergency shopping, the V&A waterfront does close a little bit late, and we certainly hope to see you ladies later on at the end of our day tomorrow at the gala dinner. So please do join us there as well. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you tomorrow. It's been a wonderful day with all of you. Thank you.